is rising, and I've been cold for so long.
Hey everyone, welcome back. So I left a community post up a couple of hours ago taking a look at how the Nautilus with its Verglas was performing in ESO. It was completely beyond my expectations, and I noticed not many people have been talking about it, so I thought I'd cover it here today. The Nautilus is the new Sentinel that you can get from the Corpus Railjack missions and comes along with its two precepts, Cordon and Auto Omni. Cordon is basically a built-in Magus anomaly that procs once every 15 seconds on enemies within range when your Sentinel is alive. The Auto Omni is another precept that has a 100% chance to repair nearby Railjack damage or breaches once every 20 seconds. So let's take a closer look at this Sentinel, why don't we? I've thrown Assault mode on immediately already since we're actually looking at the DPS potential of this Sentinel today. The beam of the weapon that comes with Nautilus acts a lot like, say, Artax, the Coolant Leaf, where you have a Force Cold procs and it significantly slows down your enemies to a crawl. So I'm just going to equip on the Cordon Precept since it's really good. Auto Omni here doesn't really have any use outside of Railjack, and in a 4-man proper squad you won't really see much benefits of it either, but I'll just slap it on here. It's not going to feature on the full builds later. So let's take a look at its weapon. Verglas is a beam weapon that sports sky-high status at 34%. This is basically unheard of for a Sentinel beam weapon. It also has innate cold on its shots at 26 per tick, which is about average, I guess you could say. But the true potential of this weapon lies in the amount of status you can spread. So let's spawn some heavy gunners and see what this does. Alright, so it's engaging from about 25 meters away, and you can see it very quickly ramped all the way up to the maximum 10 cold stacks. This is very similar to the Artax weapon from the days of old. It had Force Cold procs but had extremely low status chance, so it was a little bit iffy on proccing other things, and the damage just really wasn't there. Verglas is basically just a super souped up version that has actual status and base damage to match. So let's take a look at a full build. This is what I've been testing and working with before I showed you this video today. It basically looks a lot like your standard rifle build on a viral heat setup. So I ran Prime Shred here because I'm thinking you can get a lot of easy crowd control with this, ripping through your enemies and proccing a lot more viral and heat stacks than you would have get otherwise if you can only hit what's in front of you. Obviously this means we're going to run the 260-60 mod so that we get as much status as possible when we're making viral, as well as thermite rounds for the heat. I'm also slotting on Hellfire so that we can get a little bit back more of our heat weighting, since all of our damage, or at least most of it, is going to come from the heat procs. I'm also slotting Primed Bane of Corrupted up here for the extra double dipping from the initial damage as well as the proc scaling afterwards. So I'm just going to use the basic build on the Nautilus that I showed you earlier. Let's spawn in these heavy gunners and see how it does. Well, this time it does a lot more damage. The beam does a sizable amount, and you can see it just piling on status, getting 50 to 60 heat procs per meg dump. You seem to be able to kill off the heavy gunner with one magazine plus all the procs going along with it, but it takes a little bit of time for it to kill them off. And that's the Cordon kicking in, pulling them all in just like Magus Anomaly as you saw there, although it seems to have a slightly stronger and faster pull. So now let's take a look at Nautilus again. This time I'm going to switch over to a full build and you can see what a fully decked out setup would look like. This one cost me 5 forma to set up, which is a pretty decent amount, I guess you could say. Sentinels are a little bit hard to level up. Easiest way is getting the shared affinity through ESO from your teammates getting kills. So this is your very standard build. You have Assault mode for it to actually do damage, Cordon as I described earlier, and then you have Vacuum because you want the loot as well as Prime Regen so it survives longer. You got your standard survivability mods, Vitality and Redirection, and then you have your Quality of Life synth mods to help increase the tankiness of your Sentinel as well as giving you passive holstered reloads on your weapons. Next, obviously, we're going to run Primed Animal Instinct for that massive loot and enemy radar, and finally, we have our Fired Up. This is the secret ingredient to the whole recipe. This is an insanely strong mod on Nautilus and its Verglas because it is a beam weapon. Now this is a very interesting mod. you'll see it says plus 60% heat and max overheat, but it doesn't work like a 60% elemental heat. It actually works as a 60% extra multiplier on top of all heat that is on the weapon. It only applies the heat, and this is extremely important because this lets us increase the damage of our ticks as well as increasing the heat weight on the weapon, which means more heat procs. So if we spawn the heavy gunners again and go to test this, you'll see this time instead of 50 to 60, we're getting 70 to 80 heat procs. And the heavy gunner is dying much faster this time, where we're depleting about 3/4 or more of its HP bar with a full magazine dump. You'll see here with about 1 magazine, I can kill 1.5 of the heavy gunners, where I end up using 2 full charges before the cordon chooses to kick in and break the AI. I honestly still don't know why Sentinel AI breaks after it fires a couple of times, but that's just the way it is. Now what would be a review video without any other synergies to go along with it? Well, Zephyr just came out, so let's take a look at what we can do with her. This time I'm going to focus on her 4 per tornadoes with the funnel clouds augment. These tornadoes basically function as an AoE damage multiplier. Any damage that gets shot into them will be multiplied by 2, as well as spreading to AoE of anything that's drawn within the tornado aura. I also have air burst where I can tap it to suck them all in just like the Cordon or Magus Anomaly, but I'm a little bit reluctant to use this because actually it ragdolls the enemies and they will float up if you choose to cast your 4 while they're ragdolled. You'll waste time waiting for them to stand back up before you cast it, so I don't really advise it. On the other hand, we also have Roar infused onto this build, and surprise surprise, this actually buffs Sentinels as well, which makes Verglas extremely powerful. You can pretty much straight up kill these heavy gunners with the shot itself, and the procs are pretty much complete overkill. But what this means is it is now viable for Steel Path as well as endurance runs. You'll see me head over casting my Roar, and then I tap my 4 so I get the Seeking Tornadoes that will stay on top of the enemies. This way, when my Nautilus shoots them with a Verglas, it will pass through the tornadoes and spread the status, as well as infusing them with heat typing to spread the status more. You'll see there I pretty much annihilated the enemies very quickly. Now if you want to slot on Auto Omni, I really don't see much of a point since it only has a purpose in solo Railjack if you don't really have your command intrinsics set up. Cordon I find is a much more useful of a mod on the build, and you can just skimp by on Auto Omni. But if you really want to slot it on, you can probably drop one of the synth mods, since that won't have too much of an effect on the performance of your Sentinel. As another option on your Verglas, if you don't want to keep changing your Banes, then you can just run Heavy Caliber instead. This is the best mod that you could slot in otherwise, as it has the biggest damage increase and maintains its consistency. Being a beam weapon, Heavy Caliber basically has no effect with its accuracy penalty. Finally, I got one last little secret build to show you today. So I actually picked up a Verglas Riven. This is a very basic damage multi-shot roll, and this was actually what I used when I was leveling up in ESO and is what got me over 400 kills in 3 zones. So as you can tell, it is a very strong weapon. I chose to forego Prime Shred on this setup, and this is for the non-tornado build since you don't actually need Shred to get maximum performance out of it. Now you'll see I'm just straight up killing the heavy gunners now, where 1 magazine is enough to kill 2. The first one just gets shredded with the beam itself, and the procs don't really do much. The second one, pretty much the same story. So I'm basically killing 6 heavy gunners every single time this thing decides to shoot its 3 magazines. Now I'll show you one more time, this time with Roar casted, and you can see it's just completely shredding them. I even had leftover ammo for the 3rd heavy gunner. And you can see here that I'm already 4 down, this 5th one is gonna die, and then, well, it casts Cordon and it kicks in. But that was a very respectable performance. So if I take a look at this build one more time, if I want to use it with Zephyr's Tornadoes, I will need Prime Shred again so that I can punch through them and proc damage on the Tornadoes to spread it into an AoE as well as AoE heat procs. I'm going to drop Thermite rounds for Prime Shreds so I can preserve the heat weighting and get as much procs as possible. I do lose a little bit of status, but I feel like this is made up for by having the massive AoE on the Tornadoes. So you'll see how fast I just destroyed everything that time. We'll try it again if you don't believe me. And there you go. So I'm thinking this is probably the true power you can get out of Verglas. It's not a fully optimized Zephyr build, but you can probably set up something else to make it have a little bit more strength and a bit more duration so the roar lasts longer. Did you think the Verglas was going to turn out to be this strong? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If this is your first time watching, feel free to hit that like button or better yet subscribe. I upload almost every single day about Warframe and any of the updates or anything cool toys that I can think of. If you don't want to miss out on any little tips and tricks and secrets that I find, I'd suggest you to sign right up. 66.9% of you that are watching this are not subscribed, and I ask you, why not? You really won't want to miss those tips and tricks I'll be having, so you might want to reconsider. That's it for this video, thank you all for watching, see you all next time.